podcast babies and listeners alike. It's me. It's Pierce. I'm here alone. Matt's not here. We've both been really busy, so we haven't had time to prepare or record a podcast, and this week I'm filling in at work, giving some tests, so I'm not able to record it at a normal time. So I'm basically going to address a few questions that were sent in. From the questions, it seems like these people were actually understanding the content of the podcast, which is a relief, because I was worried I wasn't being clear, because I wasn't approaching this topic on metaethics how I have approached it in my research and writing. Instead, I've been approaching it in the podcast, kind of walking the audience through the steps that I went through in starting to think about it, not necessarily in the correct logical steps, because a lot of the problem with philosophy is that if you don't take an approach of the steps the mind goes through and the difficulties a person goes through to form their opinions, or that gets them asking certain questions, then you don't really understand the process of the philosophical inquiry. You kind of just see the end result, and that's not conducive towards actually understanding what's going on, rather than just kind of miming the abstract arguments in there. The first question that we got asked was the following. I was curious, you said you're studying metaethics, and that a possible goal of that is to somehow get to the good. But how do you go about proving that? What questions do you ask, and how do you go about solving them? I thought I'd start with this question because it's more of a clarification question than a critical engagement. Essentially, they're asking me to slow down and explain to them how I get to this concept of the good. But it's not just that. It's that in the podcast, I quickly jumped to saying, well, is life worth living? Okay, well, to answer that, I have to basically talk about the good. Well, and then I seem to just jump and say, it's all of our duties and the purpose of our life to pursue the good. So in doing metaethics, that's my way of pursuing the good. And it's not very clear exactly the conceptual steps that I'm taking to get there. And that's an okay thing to listen to the podcast and not be absolutely clear on. I wasn't trying to give an argument for the existence of the good. I was trying to sketch out the motivations that I have for doing metaethics, and that a lot of people have for doing metaethics, and the relationship not just between that, but between asking about the meaning of life, or the value of life, or why life is worth living, and coming up with a religious or metaethical theory about goodness or morality, and to kind of describe the function of religion and metaethics in addressing this existential pain that there might be no reasons to live. But I can definitely take you through very quickly a little bit more clarifying process of thinking about this. I invoke the concept of the good as sort of a historical concept to help us understand. And I said it's something like God that explains why life is worth living. And that's kind of an easy intro into thinking about metaethics. We all have this conception that there are real reasons, real good things, there are real moral things, or morality is real, and that kind of grounds the value of our lives and our work, and that we can appeal to them in order to make sense of the meaning of life. But to be real precise about this, we should first clarify our concepts. And I offer a definition of the good, but I don't think the worry about the good is the primary worry. I think we get to that much later in the inquiry into the value of our lives, whether it's worth living, etc. The first thing I'm asking is actually about why we should live, or what reason we have to live, or what gives life real value in the face of how temporary and fleeting it is. So the real existential worry that I grappled with after playing The Witcher 3 was that you go through this amazing, beautiful story and you feel so in connection with like purpose and value and goodness, and you make sense of why you do your actions and why it's worth being good or living or loving people, because you're convinced that, oh, this relationship is good. Oh, this relationship is valuable. These series of events contribute to something greater than myself that is actually valuable. And by talking in those moral ways, by saying that these relationships, these actions, these events, my life has this moral status of being valuable or good, it provides me a reason to do them, even though I know it's only temporary. So we appeal to something like morality in order to give us reasons to live, reasons to do the right thing rather than the wrong thing, reasons to, in 3,000 years when no one remembers us, that they would still consider what we've done valuable because there's a reason to. And these are called moral reasons. They're reasons that morality gives you or involves or provides to be good or to do certain things. Whenever we say that this action is wrong, we think that the wrongness of the action provides a powerful reason not to do the action. Whenever we say this entity is very valuable or good, we think that because it's valuable and good, we have a powerful reason to respect, protect, and love the entity rather than hating it. So we want to be able to appeal to these sort of moral, powerful reasons to do certain things or to regard our lives as valuable even though they're only temporary. But it's really hard to see what these reasons would be. Most of our other reasons to be moral seem to be very instrumental. They are conducive towards our goals and interests. For instance, if I tell you I want to murder my wife, and you tell me, no, that's wrong, I'll ask, why should I care if it's wrong? So give me a reason not to murder my wife. Well, then you say, well, because you'll get caught. Maybe that's one way to try to persuade me not to kill her. Okay, why should I care about me getting caught? Well, because it would make you unable to remarry or have fun outside of jail, and you would suffer in jail. Well, why should I care about all that? Well, because that would undermine what you want, your happiness, to avoid suffering. Maybe I want to overall have a long, happy life, and if I went to jail, I would die sooner and be miserable that whole time. Well, but why should I care about my ultimate goals of being happy? Oh, well, then we get into this problem of I can't seem to identify a reason to care about my happiness. Because there's no further goal I have. My happiness just is my final goal, maybe. So what reason can I appeal to? There's no utility to my happiness. I value it in itself. But is there a reason to value it in itself? Well, if there's no reason to value our final goals, our final ends, and the final ends are what provides reasons to all our subsidiary ends, well, then there's no reason to do our subsidiary actions. Think of it this way. All of our instrumental reasons to be moral or to live rely on there being some intrinsic values or these ends in themselves, these final ultimate goals that we seek. And the ultimate goals provide the reasons for doing everything else. You be good because it gets you to that final goal of living a good life. But why should I care about living a good life? You can't appeal to something like an instrumental reason. You can't say, well, it's because it would get you to some other goal. No, because that's just the last goal we have. Is there a reason to have that goal? Well, if there's not, then why would we think there's a reason? What provides a reason to be moral if being moral is just conducive to living a good life, and ultimately there's no reason to want to live a good life? And so if we want to say that there are these powerful moral reasons, we're going to have to appeal to some sort of moral entity or moral truth that will provide a reason in itself. Clearly, we want there to be a reason to be moral or to care about my wife's value. Because if there were no reasons, then, and if there was no entity to give us such reasons, or explain why the reasons exist as the ultimate reasons to be moral or whatever, or to live, then we would have to say, in a powerful sense, there's no reason to live. When you ask the question, is my life worth it? Is this event significant even though it's only temporary? You say, nah, there's no real ultimate reason. It's just what you happen to want. And there's no reason to want what you want. You just do. And that's really painful. So in seeking the good, we're seeking to kind of avoid this pain and figure out if there's any reason to be moral. And it seems really important, because if you say there's no reason to be moral, then why not murder everybody if it makes you happy? Why not just do whatever you want? Why not just be manipulative and hurt people to get what you want? Questions we ask are whether there is such a thing that explains moral reasons, or if there's any reason at all. And then to go about getting that, or figuring that out, you have to examine a bunch of different theories and then choose which theory is best based on criteria of picking the best theories, which is a whole other topic for 50 more episodes. That enables me to answer the other two questions really easily. I'm not just spending all this time on one question. This immediately has consequences for the other questions. The second question is, how do you go about reaching some conclusion? Well, how do we go about reaching some conclusion in anything? Well, we have to kind of ask the relevant questions, consult our sense experience and our intuition and how we feel, and then we pose the questions and see what possible solutions we could think of, or theories that would explain it. And this is how science, this is how everything operates. It's not just that you deduce the right answer like in math. Very few things can be directly proven. Like, oh, here's a question, look at your experience, deduce an answer to the question from it. That's not how it works in anything that's important. Rather, what we're doing is we're looking at our data and our questions. And our important data is that it seems to us that there are real moral truths and real moral reasons. How do we account for that? Then we draft up, in the light of evolutionary theory and theory of knowledge and everything, a bunch of theories about, well, what explains our moral intuitions and what would explain our feeling that there are moral reasons to live. Asking what would explain that, you might come up with answers that say, well, nothing explains that. It's just an accident of biological evolution that we came up to value the things we value and feel that there are higher reasons, feel and want there to be some good, but there really isn't. It's explainable without positing that our intuitions are right. Or you might come up and say, well, our intuitions probably are right, and so we have to construct a theory about what sort of moral entities like the good could explain this. And then you look at all the theories and you see which theories are the best. What's the simplest theory? What's the most explanatory? Well, which theory has the most explanatory power is the easier way to say that. And which theory coheres with all the data the best. And that's the same sort of theory choosing or criteria of the best theory that any discipline is going to use. And you don't come to a certain conclusion, you only come to a probabilistic conclusion, but that's all we got. There is nothing other than probabilistic conclusions. It's the best we can do. And here's finally the last question. Loving episode 2 so far. Hey, thanks. I had a similar episode with The Witcher 3 ending, except mine might add even more weight to the question, is life worth living? My ending consisted of the same empty castle, but because I didn't bother helping this one political leader in a random side quest, the game proceeded to show me a cutscene of the world I just fought so hard to preserve. And it's overrun by corrupt political leaders who enslaved all non-humans and magic users, burning them at stakes, raping their women, destroying their homelands, etc. So for me, the question wasn't just, was it all worth the struggle to preserve the world exactly how it was? But it was more of, was all of that struggle worth it now that I live in a world that has arguably become worse off because my actions or lack thereof? And that's really depressing. I've seen most of the endings to this game because I've played it so many times and watched so many videos on it. So I know the ending you're talking about. And essentially I want to say that that's really applicable to the real world too. If humanity doesn't go extinct by their own measures or actions, eventually there will be something like a heat death of the universe where there just won't be enough energy to preserve any life at all anymore. So that's going to take a long, long time. But even if we somehow figure out how to coexist, we won't be able to get around the fact that everything will die and no one will remember us. Especially if you don't believe in something like God. Which I'm not just assuming that we all believe in or that God exists. I don't want to beg the question here, right? Is it worth it to live in a world that's just going to end up? Even though we might be happy right now and might think it's got significance in the moment, the grand scheme of things, it's going to be miserable and we're all going to die. Is the world worth living in? Is life worth living? And is there any moral significance despite how painful the world is and how inevitable death of all life, all conscious life, and all moral agents is going to be? And I have to say, I don't know. I think you have to first solve the question of metaethics and of the good, essentially asking and trying to figure out, do we have any reason to suppose that there are these real moral reasons? Because if there are these moral reasons, then even though life might be finite, there might really be a reason to still regard life positively and live. But in the absence of moral reasons, then it looks like there's not. And then it's not even a matter of, should I die? It's a matter of, like, you ask the world, should I kill myself? Is it worth it? And the world looks back at you and shrugs, like I said. There is no right or wrong answer. There is no right or wrong. There's no reason to live, but there's also no reason to die. It's a world of total indifference. And saying something like to your suicidal friend, no, there's reasons to live, your life has value, would just be meaningless. The most you could be saying there is that, oh, I want you to live, I like you. Or it would make me sad if you died. But that's not a really good reason to keep living. Who cares? Who cares if it would hurt you? If I can't appeal to your value, then who cares? Especially in light of, you're going to die a painful death. All of your children will die a painful death. Your life will not amount to much in the grand scheme of the universe. You are a blip. What is your significance? What is my reason to think that you are significant in any way? So that's kind of the sum of all of these worries, because it's not just fighting to preserve an already good world. It's fighting to preserve a world that will probably end in awful, terrible pain. So I hope you enjoyed this monologue in response to the questions that I just did. It went a little long. Sorry, it's almost a full podcast length, but I thought it would be good to clarify this because on top of these specific questions, I've had a couple of people text me and ask me to specifically explain it to them. And I said, you'll have to wait because I don't want to talk on the phone to you. I'm lazy and antisocial. So after that awful rant. I hope you guys listen to the next podcast, and I will see you there. And I promise I won't just be ranting the whole time. It won't just be me, even though I normally do that. It'll be Matt too. Maybe someone else. Probably not. But it'll be at least one more person. You won't have to listen to me. Okay, goodbye.